In this lesson, we're going to look at how to write a narrative text. First, we need to understand what a narrative text is. Basically, it's a text that tells us a story. Usually, it's a story that's fun and interesting. It may be realistic, perhaps about a boy who goes camping in the desert with his family. Or it could be from our imagination, maybe an exciting adventure with a group of friends traveling to Mars. A narrative can entertain the reader. A funny story will make the reader laugh. An adventure story may keep the reader on the edge of their seat, waiting to find out what happens next. A narrative can also teach us. We often call this the moral of the story. This is the lesson that the author or writer of the story wants us to learn. Perhaps the moral of the story may be to treat others as you would like them to treat you. A narrative can also explain. This is why something happens or occurs. Let's look at the structure of a narrative. The structure are the parts of the story and the order you put them together. The structure is very important because it holds the story together, and understanding the structure will help to make you a better writer. Every narrative has 4 main parts. The first part is the orientation. Second, you have the complication. Third are the series of events. And finally, you have the resolution. Now let's take a look at each of these parts in more detail. In the orientation, you introduce the story. It tells us who is in the story, where the story starts, and also when the story happens. The who might be a pirate. It might be a boy and his camel. It may be an alien from outer space. Or it might even be you. Where could be anywhere. It could be on a pirate ship in the middle of the sea. It could be in the hot, dry desert, or far, far away in outer space. When could be a specific time in the past, such as yesterday, last week, or 10 years ago. It may not be important when the story happened. In this case, you could start your story with one day or a long time ago. After you introduce the who, where, and when, you begin a new paragraph and start writing about the second part of your narrative, the complication. The complication is just a fancy word for the problem. This is the what or the why that begins the series of events in your story. The problem might be that the pirate ship begins to sink. Maybe something frightens the camel and he runs off into the desert with the young boy hanging on. Or maybe an alien finds an astronaut who is lost in space. Next we have our series of events. These are the things that happen because of the complication or problem. To link or connect the events of the story, we need to use connectors. Some of the more common connectors are then, next, after, soon, suddenly, all of a sudden, so, and finally. To finish your narrative, you need to have a resolution. This is where the problem is solved. Sometimes, but not always, you'll also have a coda. This is a final message from the main character of the story. This message helps to make the lesson or moral of the story clear. Now you know all the parts you need to make a good narrative. But don't just start writing. You should always make a good plan. In your plan, you need to make sure you have a central theme. This is the main idea of your story. You need to create a good main character and other characters for your story. You need to decide on a setting. This is where the story takes place. With these three things, you can create your introduction. Then, you need to have a good problem that will set the story into action. After that, you need to make sure you have your series of exciting actions or events that drive your story forward. And finally, you need a solid conclusion. This is a good ending to your story that will maybe teach a good lesson to your reader. If you plan these things out before you start to write, you should be able to create a very interesting and entertaining story that your readers will enjoy. Now you have the knowledge of how to write a good narrative. You still need to practice, practice, practice if you want to become a good writer. Happy storytelling, everyone!